You don't deserve
You don't deserve
to
to work here.
Steve Morrison's voice exploded across the Value Mart store like a gunshot. Every customer turned to stare as the manager pointed an accusatory finger at Mary Washington, who stood trembling behind Register 3. Mary clutched a small purse containing 73 cents, all the money she had left in the world. Her 42-year-old hands shook as she tried to find words that wouldn't make things worse. Jason Williams paused at the store entrance, watching this moment of public humiliation unfold through smudged glass doors. In his simple grey t-shirt and worn jeans, he looked like any other job seeker about to step into what might be his worst mistake. A customer pulled out her phone, hitting record. This is 2025, not 1925. Mary's tears began to flow. My husband is dying. I just need what I've earned. Earned? Steve's laugh cut like glass. You earn what I say you earn. Jason stepped through the automatic doors, his jaw set with quiet determination. Today, everything changes. The automatic doors welcomed Jason with a mechanical greeting that felt more like a warning. The store stretched before him like a battlefield where wars were fought in silence, between dignity and survival, between hope and resignation. The scent of industrial cleaner mixed with the exhaustion of people who had no choice but to be here. Jason approached the customer service counter with the careful steps of a man who knew that his skin color would write his story before he ever opened his mouth. Behind the counter, Steve Morrison was lecturing a teenage employee about the proper way to organize returned merchandise, his voice carrying the particular brand of authority that came from knowing you could destroy someone's livelihood with a single decision. Excuse me, Jason said, his voice steady and respectful. I saw the hiring sign outside. I'd like to apply for a position. Steve's head turned with the slowness of a predator sizing up prey. His eyes traveled from Jason's face to his clothes, to his posture, and Jason could see the exact moment when prejudice crystallized into action. Just 10 minutes earlier, Steve had been all smiles and handshakes with a young white man asking about the same position. Oh. The single word carried the weight of centuries. Well, we're looking for people with specific qualifications. Steve's smile was the kind that never reached the eyes, the kind that had perfected itself in 1,000 small moments of cruelty. What kind of experience do you have? Mary appeared at the edge of Jason's vision, organizing returned items with the mechanical precision of someone who had learned to make herself invisible. Her eyes met his for just a moment, a flash of recognition, not of his identity, but of their shared understanding of what it meant to be judged before being known. I've worked in retail before, Jason replied, watching as Steve's attention drifted to Mary with the irritation of a man who saw people as inconveniences. Customer service, inventory management, team coordination. Mary! Steve's voice cracked like a whip. Don't you have customers waiting? Stop eavesdropping and get back to work. Yes, sir. Mary whispered, her voice carrying the exhaustion of someone who had apologized for existing too many times to count. Steve turned back to Jason with questions that felt more like accusations. Have you ever been arrested? Can you work every weekend, every holiday? Are you available for overtime at a moment's notice? Each question was delivered with the casual cruelty of someone who knew that desperation would force the answers he wanted. Jason had never heard these questions asked of the white applicants. He had never seen them subjected to the particular brand of scrutiny that turned job interviews into interrogations. But he answered each one with the patience of a man who understood that sometimes you had to walk through hell to reach the other side. As he spoke, he watched Mary work 6 hours straight without a break, while white employees rotated every 2 hours. He watched the way she flinched when Steve passed, the way she counted and recounted money with the paranoia of someone who knew that any discrepancy would be blamed on her character rather than the broken system she served. "We might have something in the stockroom," Steve said finally, the words dripping with the kind of reluctant condescension that made Jason's hands curl into fists. "Minimum wage, of course. We'll see how you work out." The stockroom was a cathedral of capitalism's cruelest truth shelves that reached toward fluorescent heavens, filled with products that promised happiness to people who could afford it. Steve led Jason through the maze of merchandise, with the swagger of a warden showing off his domain, pointing out tasks that seemed designed more to humiliate than to accomplish anything productive. "You'll start with cleaning the employee restrooms," Steve announced, handing Jason a bucket and mop that had seen better decades. "Then you can handle the difficult customers. We get a lot of problem people in here. After that, you'll move these inventory boxes from the top shelves down to the floor level. No lifting equipment, that's for employees who've proven themselves." Each task was a test designed for failure, a gauntlet thrown down by a man who needed to prove his power by diminishing others. Jason accepted each assignment with the grace of someone who knew that sometimes strength was measured not by what you could do, but by what you could endure. During the brief 15-minute break that Steve grudgingly allowed, Jason found himself standing beside Mary at the vending machine that offered overpriced salvation to the underpaid. She stood there, staring at the prices like they were written in a foreign language. $2.50 for a sandwich that cost less than $1 to make. "I'm sorry about what happened earlier," Mary said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Steve doesn't usually— well, he does, but—" "It's not your fault," Jason replied, and something in his voice made her look up, really look at him for the first time. "I haven't been paid in 3 months," she said suddenly, the words rushing out like water through a broken dam. "They say there's a problem with the payroll system, but only for some of us. Only for people who look like—" She gestured vaguely at her skin, then at his. Jason felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. 3 months? "My husband is dying," she continued, and now the tears were coming whether she wanted them or not. "Stage 4 cancer, the medical bills, the medications. I've borrowed from everyone I know. I take the bus here because we lost the car last month. I count quarters to buy bread that's too old for most people to want." The fury that rose in Jason's throat tasted like copper and injustice. He had built this company on the promise that honest work would be rewarded with honest pay. He had signed every policy manual that promised dignity and respect for all employees. And yet here was Mary, working herself into exhaustion for a company that treated her labor like theft. "Why don't you quit?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Where would I go?" Mary's laugh was the saddest sound Jason had ever heard. "I'm 42, Black, and I never finished high school. Steve knows I can't leave. They all know we can't leave." As if summoned by the mention of his name, Steve appeared around the corner, his face twisted with the particular satisfaction of a man catching someone in the act of being human. "Mary, your break ended 3 minutes ago. I don't pay you to stand around gossiping." His eyes flicked to Jason with barely concealed contempt. "And those boxes aren't going to move themselves. Unless you think this job is beneath you." Jason watched Steve walk away, noted the way other employees, mostly immigrants and people of color, scattered like leaves before his approach, while white employees continued their conversations uninterrupted. He pulled out his phone and sent a carefully coded message to his legal team. "Need emergency consultation." Code read. The game was changing, and Steve Morrison had no idea what he had just started. The explosion came without warning, triggered by the simple act of Jason asking about employee rights and company policies. He had approached Steve's desk with the quiet dignity of a man seeking information, not confrontation. But Steve's reaction was immediate and volcanic. "What the hell are you asking so many questions for?" Steve's voice carried across the store like a siren, drawing stares from customers and employees alike. "You people always want to know about benefits and rights before you've even proved you can do the work." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire that had been burning for centuries. Jason stood perfectly still, his hands at his sides, watching as Steve transformed from petty tyrant to something more dangerous, a man who had been given just enough power to destroy lives and just enough protection to get away with it. "I just wanted to understand the employee handbook," Jason said calmly, his voice steady despite the rage building in his chest like pressure in a volcano. "Employee handbook?" Steve's laugh was sharp and cruel. "Listen here, boy." The word hit like a slap, and several customers turned to stare. "I know your type. You come in here thinking you're entitled to something, thinking the world owes you because of some imaginary oppression. Well, let me tell you something. This is my store, and in my store, you earn respect." A white-haired woman in aisle 3 pulled out her phone and began recording. Her voice carried clearly as she spoke to someone off-camera. "This manager is being completely inappropriate. This is 2025, not 1925. Steve noticed the phone, and his face went red, but instead of backing down, he doubled down with the desperation of a man who knew his power was built on foundations of sand. "You want to know what I think?" Steve stepped closer, his voice dropping to what he probably thought was a threatening whisper, but was clearly audible to everyone nearby. "I think you're just here to cause trouble. I think you're one of those people who comes in looking for a lawsuit, looking for something to complain about. Well, you won't find it here." Mary materialized beside Jason like an angel of quiet courage. "Mr. Steve, he was just asking about policies. Everyone has the right to—" "Mary." Steve's voice was ice and fire combined. "Do you want to go home early today?" "Permanently." The threat hung between them like a blade, and Jason watched Mary's face crumble as she realized that her attempt to stand up for justice might cost her the job that was killing her slowly but keeping her husband alive. Jason felt his phone vibrate, a message from his head of legal affairs confirming that they were standing by for emergency action. He had activated the recording app on his phone, capturing every word of Steve's tirade for the legal proceedings that would inevitably follow. These policies seemed to apply differently to different people, Jason said quietly, his voice carrying just enough weight to make Steve pause. "I wonder if corporate would be interested in understanding why that is?" Steve's eyes narrowed. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm just wondering," Jason replied. "If the people who own this company know how their employees are being treated, I'm wondering if they know what happens when someone with the wrong skin color asks the wrong questions." The crowd of customers was growing now, phones appearing like flowers in spring, all pointed at the unfolding drama. Hashtags were already forming in their minds. Hashtag Value Mart Racism, hashtag Justice for Employees, hashtag Enough is Enough. Steve looked around at the gathering storm and made the decision that would seal his fate. Instead of backing down, instead of apologizing, he chose to escalate. "You know what? I think we're done here. I think you need to leave my store right now before I call security and have you removed for trespassing." Jason stood his ground, his dignity intact despite the humiliation raining down on him like acid. "I haven't done anything wrong." "That's what we'll let the police decide," Steve said, reaching for his phone. The crowd murmured with disapproval, but Jason remained calm. He knew that sometimes you had to let the darkness reveal itself completely before the light could shine through. "Call them," he said quietly. "But I wonder, do you know who you're really dealing with?" The first level of escalation began with Steve's power trip, reaching dangerous heights. He assigned Jason to clean the industrial freezer, a -18-degree chamber, where breath turned to ice and exposed skin burned with cold without proper protective equipment. When Jason requested safety gear, Steve's response was swift and public. "You think you're special? You think you deserve better treatment than everyone else?" Steve's voice echoed through the store as employees and customers watched the confrontation unfold. Do the job or get out. That's how it works in the real world. Jason's refusal to work in unsafe conditions was met with Steve's call to security. "Remove this troublemaker," he ordered, pointing at Jason like he was identifying a criminal. "He's being insubordinate and refusing to follow direct orders." But Jason remained calm, his voice steady as he addressed the growing crowd. "I'm just asking for the safety equipment that OSHA requires for this type of work. That's not insubordination, that's basic worker protection." The second level erupted when customers began to intervene. The white-haired woman who had been recording stepped forward, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen too much injustice to remain silent. "This young man is being discriminated against," she announced to anyone within earshot. "I've been shopping here for 20 minutes, and I've seen white employees get breaks, get help, get treated with basic human decency. This is wrong." Her words were the spark that lit the fire. Other customers began pulling out phones, live streaming the confrontation to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Within minutes, hashtags were trending. #ValueMartRacism, #JusticeForJason, #EnoughIsEnough. Steve panicked, calling for additional security guards, creating a spectacle that drew more attention rather than less. "Everyone needs to mind their own business," he shouted, but his voice was breaking under the pressure of public scrutiny. Mary and Rosa, a young Salvadoran woman who worked in the deli section, stepped forward together. Their courage was born from years of silent suffering, finally given voice by the presence of someone willing to stand with them. "This isn't right," Mary said, her voice trembling but determined. "We've been afraid to speak up because we need these jobs, but this man has done nothing wrong except ask for basic fairness." Steve's response was swift and vicious. "You want to join him? You want to lose your jobs too? Because I can replace all of you in one phone call, there are plenty of people who would be grateful for the opportunity to work here." The third level of chaos erupted when Steve made the decision that would haunt him forever. Surrounded by cameras, faced with a crowd that was clearly sympathetic to Jason, he chose the nuclear option. "Lock down the store," he ordered security. "Don't let anyone leave until we sort this out. And call 911. Tell them we have a potential shoplifter trying to leave without paying for merchandise." The false accusation hit the crowd like a thunderclap. Customers began shouting their disapproval, demanding to see what Jason had allegedly stolen. The live streams were now pulling in hundreds of thousands of viewers, the comment sections exploding with outrage and disbelief. Jason knew he was now in real danger. A black man accused of theft by a white manager in a locked store was a scenario that had ended badly too many times in American history. He discreetly activated his emergency protocols, sending coded messages to his legal team and security personnel through his Bluetooth earpiece, disguised as adjusting his collar. Outside, news vans were beginning to arrive, drawn by the viral videos and the growing social media storm. Inside, Mary stepped in front of the cameras with a courage that surprised even herself. "I want everyone to know," she said, her voice clear and strong despite her tears, "that I haven't been paid in 3 months. None of the black or Hispanic employees have been paid properly. We've been afraid to speak up because we need these jobs to survive, But I can't stay silent anymore when someone is being treated like this for asking for basic human rights. Jason stood in the center of the storm, watching as the company he had built from nothing became the stage for a confrontation that would define not just his own legacy, but the future of workplace justice in America. The irony was not lost on him. He was being destroyed by the very system he had created, persecuted by policies that bore his signature. But as he watched Mary find her voice, as he saw other employees beginning to stand up despite their fear, as he witnessed customers refusing to be bystanders to injustice, Jason felt something he hadn't expected: hope. The storm was about to break, and when it did, the truth would finally have its day. The moment of ultimate tension arrived like a perfect storm. Steve held his phone aloft, his finger hovering over the 911 call button, while 3 security guards formed a circle around Jason. The store had become a coliseum, with customers pressed against the perimeter, their phones capturing every second of what felt like a modern-day lynching dressed up as corporate policy. "This is your last chance," Steve announced to the crowd, his voice cracking with the strain of maintaining authority that was slipping through his fingers like sand. "Leave now, or you'll all be considered accessories to whatever crimes this man has committed." The accusation was absurd, and everyone knew it, but the power dynamics were clear. One black man, isolated and vulnerable, facing down a system designed to crush people exactly like him. And then the phones began to ring. Not the customers' phones, those had been buzzing constantly with incoming calls and messages of support. These were different phones, the ones carried by Value Mart employees, the devices connected to the company's internal emergency notification system. The first chime was soft, almost musical. Then another. Then a cascade of electronic sounds as every phone in the store received the same message simultaneously. Linda Rodriguez, the regional manager who had been called in by the commotion, was the first to read hers aloud, her voice barely a whisper. "Emergency alert. CEO Jason Williams on-site inspection. All management personnel report immediately." The words hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Steve's face went through a series of transformations: confusion, disbelief, and then a terror so pure it was almost pitiable. "No," he whispered, looking at his own phone as if it might be lying to him. "No, that can't be." The store's overhead screens, normally reserved for advertisements and price announcements, flickered to life with a message in corporate blue and gold. CEOONSITE, COMPANY, WIDENSPECTIONINPROGRESS. Jason reached into his wallet with the calm deliberation of a man who had waited his entire career for this moment. The platinum card that emerged wasn't just an employee ID, it was the key to an empire, emblazoned with his name and title: Jason Williams, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer, Value Mart Corporation. The silence that followed was deafening. It was the sound of assumptions crashing, of prejudices crumbling, of a worldview built on quicksand finally collapsing into the truth. "My name is Jason Williams," he said quietly, his voice carrying to every corner of the store. "I am the founder, chairman, and CEO of Value Mart Corporation. I came here today because I received reports about employee mistreatment and wage theft. I wanted to see for myself what was happening in my company." The security guards released their grip on him, as if he had suddenly burst into flames. One of them, an older black man who had probably spent his entire life being told to respect authority, looked like he might cry. Steve Morrison, the man who had spent the last hour humiliating and threatening the most powerful person in the building, stood frozen like a deer in headlights, his mouth opening and closing without sound. From the back of the store, Linda Rodriguez appeared, running as fast as her heels would allow, followed by Marcus Thompson, the regional operations director. Both of them looked like they had aged 10 years in the past 10 minutes. "Mr. Williams," Linda gasped, trying to catch her breath. "We had no idea you were— We didn't receive any notification of an inspection. That was the point." Jason replied calmly. "I wanted to see how my employees are treated when they think no one important is watching." Mary Washington stood with her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Rosa was sobbing openly, and other employees were emerging from aisles and back rooms, drawn by the commotion and staying for the revelation. A customer near the front of the crowd spoke up, her voice filled with awe. "Oh my God, this is like something out of a movie." "The CEO was here the whole time. Plot twist of the century," someone else added, and nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. But Jason's attention was focused on Steve, who had begun to tremble visibly. The man who had wielded authority like a weapon was now faced with the reality that he had been torturing the person who could end his career with a word. "Steve," Jason said quietly, "I think we need to have a conversation about how you treat people." The explosion of emotion that followed was immediate and overwhelming. Customers cheered, employees cried, and social media exploded with the hashtag CEO Justice as the videos went viral around the world. The revolution had begun, and the justice was finally taking the stage. The fall of Steve Morrison was swift, complete, and public. Jason's voice, when he finally spoke the words that would end one man's reign of terror, was calm as still water and sharp as a blade. "Steve Morrison," he announced, his words carrying to every corner of the store and to the hundreds of thousands watching on Livestream, "You are terminated immediately for violation of federal employment law, workplace harassment, racial discrimination, and wage theft." Steve collapsed to his knees as if his strings had been cut. The man who had spent years wielding power over the vulnerable was now the most vulnerable person in the room, surrounded by the very people he had tormented, and an audience of millions watching his downfall in real time. "Please," he begged, his voice breaking like a child's. "Mr. Williams, I didn't know. I have a family, I have children. Please, I can change. I can do better." Jason looked down at him with the cold assessment of a surgeon removing a cancer. "Did you think about Mary's family when you refused to pay her for 3 months? Did you consider her husband's medical bills when you threatened to fire her for defending basic human rights?" The store erupted in applause, and Steve's pleas were drowned out by the sound of justice finally arriving. Jason turned to Linda Rodriguez, who stood pale and shaking nearby. "I want a full audit of every employee's pay records going back 2 years. Anyone who has been shorted even a penny gets full compensation plus 15% annual interest, calculated from the date payment was due. I want those checks cut within 24 hours. "Yes, sir," Linda whispered. "Furthermore," Jason continued, his voice growing stronger with each word, "I want a company-wide investigation into every one of our 847 locations. Any manager found guilty of discriminatory practices will be terminated immediately, and any employee who has suffered will be compensated fully." Steve was led away by security, the same guards who had been ready to arrest Jason minutes earlier, now treating him like the dangerous criminal he had revealed himself to be. As he was escorted past the crowd of customers and employees, his humiliation was complete and public, broadcast live to a world that had been waiting too long to see accountability for workplace abuse. The aftermath was swift and comprehensive. Jason announced the creation of a $50 million employee justice fund, designed to compensate workers who had suffered under discriminatory management. He established a 24/7 anonymous hotline for reporting workplace abuse and mandated anti-discrimination training for every manager in the company. Mary Washington, the woman who had counted quarters for bread that morning, was approached by Jason with an offer that would change her life forever. "Mary," he said, his voice gentle but filled with the authority of genuine power used for good. "I'd like to offer you the position of shift supervisor. Starting salary is $75,000 annually, plus full medical benefits that will cover your husband's cancer treatment completely." "I don't know what to say," she sobbed, clutching the promotion letter like a lifeline. "Say that you'll help me make sure this never happens to anyone else," Jason replied. Within hours, the video of Steve's termination had been viewed 50 million times. Barack Obama tweeted, "This is what real leadership looks like, a CEO who doesn't just talk about values, but lives them." The hashtag #JusticeAtValueMart trended worldwide, and the company's stock price soared as investors recognized that genuine social responsibility was good business. But for Jason, the real victory wasn't in the headlines or the stock prices. It was in watching Mary straighten her shoulders and smile for the first time in months. It was in seeing Rosa speak up without fear. It was in knowing that tomorrow, employees across America would go to work with a little more dignity and a little more hope. Steve Morrison had fallen, but more importantly, a system that had protected bullies and punished victims was beginning to crumble. When the cameras stopped rolling and the crowds dispersed, Jason gathered the remaining employees in the break room, a space that had witnessed countless quiet humiliations and was now becoming the birthplace of something better. "Today I learned something important," he began, his voice gentle but carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom. "To truly understand what's happening in your organization, you have to be willing to see it through the eyes of the people who have the least power." He looked directly at Mary, whose transformation from broken victim to empowered advocate had been the most powerful testimony to the change that was possible when someone finally listened. "Mary, you taught me what real courage looks like. You showed me that speaking truth to power isn't about having authority. It's about having the conviction that every human being deserves to be treated with dignity." The applause was softer now, more thoughtful, the kind that comes when people recognize truth rather than spectacle. "I want everyone here to understand something," Jason continued. "The power that I have as CEO isn't meant to elevate me. It's meant to elevate all of you. Every decision we make, every policy we implement, every dollar we spend should be guided by one simple question. Does this make life better for the people who do the actual work?" The changes he announced were immediate and comprehensive. Every ValueMart location would now have an employee representative on its management committee, ensuring that workers' voices would be heard in every decision that affected their lives. The company would establish an emergency hardship fund for employees facing medical crises or family emergencies. Anonymous reporting systems would be implemented through the Go Speak Up app to ensure that no one would ever again have to choose between speaking up and keeping their job. I'm also announcing that every ValueMart employee will receive a living wage, not minimum wage, but enough to support a family with dignity. Because if our business model can't support paying people enough to live on, then our business model is wrong. The room erupted in cheers and tears, but Jason held up a hand for quiet. "But here's the most important thing I want you to remember. This change didn't happen because I'm a good person or because I'm enlightened. It happened because people like Mary refused to stay silent. It happened because Rosa found her voice. It happened because customers decided they wouldn't be bystanders to injustice." He paused, looking around the room at faces that had been transformed by hope. "Real change doesn't come from the top down. It comes from the bottom up, when people decide they've had enough and they're willing to stand together for something better. Today, all of us won." Jason turned to face the camera that would carry his final message to the millions who had watched his journey from undercover employee to revealed CEO. His eyes held the fire of a man who had seen the worst of human nature and chosen to believe in the best. "You don't have to be a CEO to create change," he said, his voice carrying the conviction of someone who had walked through the valley of injustice and emerged with his faith in humanity intact. "Every time you refuse to laugh at a racist joke, every time you stand up for a co-worker who's being bullied, every time you choose to see the humanity in someone society tells you to ignore, you're changing the world." He took a step closer to the camera, his presence filling the frame with quiet intensity. Every revolution starts with one person deciding they've had enough. Every movement begins when someone says, "This isn't right, and I won't be part of it anymore." Today, you have that choice. Today, you can decide what kind of person you want to be and what kind of world you want to live in. His voice grew stronger, more urgent, as he delivered his final challenge. Be the leader you wish you had when you needed one most. Be the voice for those who haven't found theirs yet. Be the change you want to see, not tomorrow, not next week, but right now, in this moment, with the very next choice you make. Jason's final words were delivered with the quiet power of a man who had transformed his own pain into purpose. Justice doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't ask for the perfect moment or the ideal circumstances. Justice starts with you, today, wherever you are, with whatever power you have. Because in the end, the only question that matters is this: when someone needed you to stand up, did you? The screen faded to black, but the message remained, burning bright in the hearts of everyone who had witnessed the power of one person choosing to do what was right.